Somehow, I told you so just doesn't quite say it.
And I can't find a seconder usually when I record this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed are greater than the legal services provided by other lawyers. I'm Harry Steele. You found the Backstory Podcast. Going the wrong way. Number 144. And the proposition is Tom should resign. I'm joined today by my client and partner in crime, Mr. Francis Paul Ripp in Fairhope. How are you today, Mr. Ripp?
I'm here on this beautiful day, and I must say, I told you so.
And Brandon Mosley, reporter in Moody, Alabama, journalist and columnist at alabamatoday.com. How are you today, Brandon?
Oh, I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
So, Mr. Ripp, we had a little news this week. There was a motion filed, and I believe you have it in your hands.
I do.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about the content thereof?
Well, you and we had talked that we didn't think that Mr. Albritton, with executive director of the Ethics Commission, could last another 6 months with all the pressure that's on him. And evidently that came true within about a week of us talking about it, because in Circuit Court of Montgomery, a motion by the Honorable Steve Marshall in his official capacity as Attorney General, State of Alabama, as qualified beneficiary of the Mabel Amos Trust, to add Thomas A. Albritton, John Bell, he was with Regions Bank, and Rick Clifton as party defendants. Now, the document's about 5 pages long, but I would like to read you a couple of them. On number 9, the board members jointly and severely and separately engaged in acts of self-dealing or breached their fiduciary and other duties to the trust by failing to prevent or prohibit self-dealing, or permitting and acquiescing in self-dealing, and engaging in other acts, omissions, and violation of statutory and common law duties owed by the trust. And then number 16, the Attorney General's claims against the additional defendants all arise from the trust and include claims concerning the administration, management, grant or distribution of benefits, qualifications, beneficiaries, self-dealing, prohibited grants, increments for the benefit of private individuals, and other claimed wrongful acts and omissions. And then in 17, where Mr. Marshall qualifies his standing, it is because the plaintiff's claim arise from concern and relate to the trust and charitable trust, and because the Attorney General has a right of qualified beneficiary under Alabama Code Section 19-3B-110, parentheses D. The Attorney General is the party in interest who has standing to enforce the terms of the trust. Under that code, charitable organizations do not have beneficiaries in the usual sense. Now, this is the third action that has happened. There was a lawsuit by Mr. Tommy Gallion, and there's another lawsuit filed out of, what was the gentleman's name? Harry Mitchell? I can't remember now, but anyway, he's representing the school kids in Connecticut County, and that's the lawsuit that I really favor. And this could lead to criminal charges. 2 things I predict is, number 1, they'll all be kicked off the trust, and number 2, they will have to pay back the money that they paid. And the surprise package for everybody is going to be when we see who all got the trust money. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, so one thing you missed that was important was the allegation that the money that went to his children, because it was improper, that created a constructive trust, which he intends to claw back. That was in that document that you read to the pertinent parts. That's the only thing you missed that I thought was important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about not this trial, but if you think this is the only generational lawyer in the South with privilege, you ain't been to Andalusia lately. So if you'll give me just a second, I'll cue us up, and we'll watch a little bit about who his relatives are. Now, this is Greg Albritton, and this is a campaign ad from 2014 when he was running for Senate District 22. He's still in the same place.
He's a cousin?
Yes.
Now and have for the last 20 years. I'm in this race because I'm the best man for the job. It may sound a little bit arrogant, but I've served in the House before. I know the rules. I know the procedures. I know the process that these things are to get done. Senate 22 needs an effective leader who knows how to get things done. I can do that. I've proven that. I've got a record of conservatism that is surpassed by no one.
Allegedly.
Yeah. That's a tough race in Alabama, conservatism.
All right, so listen up, boys.
Our youngest, Tom, was born in 1967 in Andalusia, and he lives in Andalusia now, and he's married to Amanda Riggs from Camden.
All right, so I don't want to get into all that stuff, but he admits that Tom, this is Harold Albritton, federal judge, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty powerful person, right?
So Tom Albritton was born the same year that I was in Vietnam.
Well, after you graduated from Marion Military Institute, you went on to college at the University of Alabama. Is that right?
That's right.
How did you come to select Alabama over perhaps some other colleges?
Well, I've been a fan of the University of Alabama since childhood. That's really about the only place I thought about going. I'd been a football fan of there, a fan of the school. My mother and father had both been to the University of Alabama. My grandfather had been to the University of Alabama. There's an Alabama tradition in the family that I'd been going there, visiting with relatives who lived in Tuscaloosa since childhood, spending weekends for homecoming and everything else there, and it was just a natural thing for me to move on to the university.
And that loyalty has remained to this day, I'm quite sure. I understand that you were, among other things, vice president of the Student Government Association while you were there.
Listen up.
Yeah.
I think you were named the Outstanding Freshman Student. You're a member of Phi Beta Kappa, Academic Honorary, Omicron Delta Kappa Honorary, and Jason's, which is a University of Alabama honorary for senior men. You stayed on in Tuscaloosa.
So at Auburn, we had an underground, whereas in Tuscaloosa it's called the Machine. At Auburn, we had Spades. At Alabama, they have Jasons. Did you ever know anybody that was a Spade at Auburn?
I had very little dealings with any of the fraternities or sororities when I was at.
Well, this is, and like I said, his cousin's the guy who's deciding how $3 billion in American Rescue funds are going to be handled, right? I mean, these are people with lots of stroke. So it took a lot of guts for Rob Holbert to walk out into traffic. I'll give him credit for breaking this story. And whoever that guy is up in Tuscaloosa that's his source, he needs to start sharing. Don't you agree, Paul?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, whoever that guy is, I need to take him out.
Well, I know who it is, but I don't think I'll give you some coverage right now. I think I'll just hold back on his name, but we certainly appreciate what he did. And it was mentioned in I think Rob's first article, how he came to find the information, which we can say the reason the University of Alabama found it is that it had a particular employee that started looking at how they were receiving their trust and scholarships and giving them out to, and who were these people. And he recognized the fact that Albritton was the executive director of the Ethics Commission, and that threw him for a loop, and that's what started the whole thing.
So, if you would continue the story for us, her great aunt's trust was flush, not only flush, but like replete with money.
Well, that really was interesting. Rob broke the story. And when Rob broke the story, I called him and I asked him, I said, were you able to get in touch with any of the relatives directly? And he said no, that he had tried. And I spent about 2 days running down different names, and finally through an obituary thing, found the name of Megan Carmack, and she is the daughter of Lee Manning. And Lee Manning is directly related to Mabel Amos. And the Mabel Amos Trust she was the first female Secretary of State of Alabama. And it started out as a pretty, limited trust, had about $500,000 in it and some land. But in 2010, they discovered oil up to $100 million worth of oil and gas. So when I was able to find, I went through 2 or 3 relatives until I got to Megan Carmack, and talking to the family directly there, they had no idea, none, zero. It was a complete shock to them. Of course, they hadn't seen the article because it was produced out of Mobile, but they had no knowledge of it at all. Now, I believe there's like 14,000 people in the entire county, Connecticut County. And that, I think, is the most amazing thing to me above anything, is that how did they keep this secret? How in the world did $100 million worth of minerals come out of the ground and connect the county and leave the county, and this trust be so abused?
So I used to be the county administrator in Connecticut County, and when I ran for Attorney General this time last year, I went to the Republican Party meeting in Connecticut County in the basement of the Mason's Lodge. And anyway, there were many people there that I knew. You remember you met Dudley Godwin when we stopped through Evergreen that time? We were dropping off a complaint at the Attorney General's office about this very thing. So, Dudley was there and some other people that I knew, and I told them about this, and I'm just either nobody believed me or nobody cared.
Well, I reported it to the paper there, sent them copies of it, and they didn't even write an article, and it's in their county.
But don't you think if a candidate's running for office and they stump in your county and they, I said, anybody in here know Ms. Amos? Oh, yeah, I remember Ms. Amos. I said, well, did you know that she left some land over here and they struck oil on it, and there's $100 million worth of oil and gas come out of the ground, and $15 million supposed to go out in scholarships, and he gave his kids money, and the Regions Bank's got $1 million, and everybody's sitting there going, man, there ain't no way that was going on and we don't know about it.
Well, that's been the response. That has been the response of out of Connecticut County from any of the people. I hate to say it, what's Luther's radio station number?
The Power Pig, WPGG.
Luther Upton, he and I served in the Marine Corps, and since this story broke, we gave him all that information. He's gone to the school and talked to different people prominent in the community. No one, he said, absolutely no one had any idea of this going on.
And Luther and I served under the reign of Sheriff Halsey when I was the county administrator, and he'd have me down to discuss any number of things going on. And we were really terrorized by that sheriff up there. I don't know if he's ever told you about that too much, but Luther and I go back too. 20 years ago. Talk just a minute about who the Ethics Commission members are and what exactly Tom, and then I'm going to let Brandon tell us what Tom's supposed to be doing. So John Plunk is the chairman. He's from Athens, Alabama. Lynn Stewart, the vice chair. I used to go to church with her. She was the first female Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. And let's say she's a person that operates above reproach. Is that a good way to say it, Brandon?
She's well thought of in Montgomery.
Right. Then you have Stanton McDonald from Huntsville, and then Edward Cromwell of Montgomery. I believe he's a retired 3-star. So all these guys on paper, man, they're the spectacular people. I can't figure for the life of me why they would keep Cynthia Ralston employed after she was defrocked by the Attorney General, and now Executive Director Albritton has had these allegations alleged in this civil suit. You understand what I mean? I mean, it calls into question their leadership when things like this go on. And so Brandon, tell us a little bit about what Executive Director Albritton is supposed to be doing.
Okay. The members of the commission are all part-timers that show up once every couple of months, and they consider the motions that are put in front of them by the director and his staff. The director, of course, is Tom Albritton. If you file an ethics complaint, it goes to the ethics commission, and instead of the commissioners looking at it, it's Tom Albritton and his investigators then decide whether your complaint from Baldwin County or Connecticut County or wherever is legit or is not legit, and then they pass their judgments on to the commissioners, in hearings that are like every 2 or 3 months, and they decide whether or not, an Alabama ethics law violation has occurred based on the recommendations of their director and his staff.
Yeah.
So, Paul, after all this press and the goings on in the newspaper, this is January 25th, 2023.
Thank you, Brian. All right, I want to welcome everybody to the first quarterly lobbyist training for 2023. My name is Tom Albritton. I'm the executive.
Now, Brandon, what do lobbyists do?
A lobbyist is a licensed professional under state of Alabama law who represents an individual, a corporation, or a nonprofit organization in order to advance or deter legislation that the principal wants advanced or in some cases killed.
So somebody that gets paid money to influence legislators. And so, and
it's highly regulated, as I'm sure Tom explains in his presentation.
Well, let's listen to it for a second.
Director of the State Ethics Commission. Today's training will take about an hour, probably less than that. And the purpose of it is to cover the basics of the Ethics Act, certainly as it relates to you as lobbyists.
Yep. That's just the other day, boys and girls.
I have my diploma.
They do ethics training every year.
They do ethics training every quarter.
Yeah.
Every quarter.
It's a routine deal, and they train the legislators in the ethics law every 4 years.
And think how utterly preposterous a situation this is, that Mr. Albritton is traveling around the states talking about ethics, and he's embroiled in this thing now to the point to where his feet are in cement. I can tell you, his days are numbered.
Check this out. This is September 7th, 2021, when Rob breaks the story that, oh, yes, he got even more money. Remember? And it was after he became ethics commissioner?
Correct.
Then he writes the Alabama recipe for corruption cake, and then there's a lawsuit. Oh, well, then Mr. Ripp files a lawsuit, right?
Right.
October 2021. Again, he's still doing ethics training. Then you write your dirty underwear about how the bar and the Attorney General and the Ethics Commission appear to all be, working together and all the ins and outs, and that it's pretty much paint by numbers of how to convict somebody. Here it is. We've laid it all out in our complaint.
I sure am glad we wrote all that down.
Well, and thank goodness there's Alicourt, because the copies that I have are so just worn out from hand wringing over them. So you filed a writ of mandamus against the ethics commission, and you were asking the court not to find anyone guilty, but to reevaluate 3 complaints that you felt like Mr. Albritton didn't give a fair shake to, and you point to the Mabel Amos Memorial Scholarship self-dealing as an example of how Mr. Albritton does not understand ethics, or at least not in your mind.
Right.
Is that an accurate depiction of the writ of mandamus?
That's as accurate as I can put it.
So the trust document has 2 simple ethical provisions. The trustee shall not engage in any self-dealing as defined by Section 494D, and shall not make any taxable expenditures as defined in Section 5489, referring to the Internal Revenue Code. And then you allege that Director Tom Albritton's children received scholarship from the Mabel Amos Memorial Fund in violation of Sections 4941D and 5489. And so then we move on, and I'll let you just talk a little bit about the three ethics complaints that were underlying that you believed had merit, and that were dismissed by Mr. Albritton with a simple letter saying, we've reviewed this and that's all we can, it's going to go no further.
Well, the first one was the Fairhope Airport Authority board members Jack Burrell and Ray Hicks, who's partners with the municipal judge in Fairhope, Haynes Snedeker. The second one was North Baldwin's utility board members, particularly Robert Bob Wills and James Robinson, related to the purchase of 2 houses in Steelwood Country Club. And is the same Bob Wills that's now renting his building to the Baldwin County Legislative Delegation, if you can figure that out. And then the third one was the Fairhope City Councilman Robert Brown, who was serving on the board of the Fairhope Arts Commission, and then took a very healthy contract while he was there without any competing bid and without letting anybody know what was going on until it was too late. And all 3 of those were denied by the Ethics Commission in like a 2-sentence letters. And a lot of them, most of them, we had a tremendous amount of evidence that we sent to them. And never contact you or anything else, just one curt letter, and that's it. But now I call into question those 3 cases simply because look at where Mr. Albritton is now. He is absolutely the opposite of what he represents there at the Ethics Commission.
Well, so the problem with Albritton being the position that he's in is that he's compromised by his own involvement in the Mabel Amos Trust. So if he gets Mr. Ripp's complaints about these other issues and other people, and of course if he rules that Mr. Ripp is a credible arbiter of truth and forwards those issues, then his own issue, which you have also forwarded. If he says you're credible in the other complaints, why aren't you credible in his complaint? So it's kind of self-serving to say, yeah, that complaint we got from Harry and Mr. Ripp.
So as a citizen taxpayer, Mr. Ripp has a right to have the ethics complaint evaluated and investigated for the alleged violation of the state ethics law. The Code of Alabama, Section 3625.5, demands that the Ethics Commission to investigate any, quote, personal use of office, and specifically Section 3625.47 states, make investigations with respect and upon complaints by an individual with respect to alleged violations of any part of this chapter to the extent authorized by law. Plaintiff believes that these complaints were dismissed without investigation at the direction of the director of the Ethics Commission, Thomas Albritton, where the alleged bad actor, quote, abstained from voting on the matter. I guess we should back up just a second and say that Mr. Ripp, previous to this, had filed an ethics complaint and a bar complaint. And the answer to the question of self-dealing, Mr. Albritton said that he, quote, abstained from voting on the matter when the matter of his children getting money came up. And, of course, Mr. Gallion attacked that in his lawsuit, right?
Right.
Where he said what? He said
You'll have to read that one.
He said there was a quid pro quo, right?
Right.
He said whenever it was time for Regions Bank to get $1 million in fees, Regions Bank would abstain, and when it came time for the other partner, the third member, to get money, he would abstain. And then when his children came up, Albritton would abstain. The initial lawsuit was filed with Mr. Gallion on behalf of Ms. Carmack. And then we've had other people jump into the complaint. And you see here our Alabama Supreme Court. Down here you have the circuit courts. And typically right here under the trial courts of general jurisdiction is where I consider the district attorney's office, or over here next to the circuit courts, right? So typically, if you're charged with a crime, you would be arrested, you would bond out of jail, you would go to the district courts if you had any preliminary evidentiary issues. Then the district attorney would take it to the grand jury, right? And the grand jury would decide if you were guilty or not. Well, if you're an elected official, they've come up with a special way of doing it, and Mr. Albritton is in charge of that.
I think that we should start a lottery for the day that Mr. Albritton has to walk out of the Ethics Commission and he and Cynthia Ralston are fired, because that is coming down the pike any day. And the story, Brandon, that I hope you're really looking at is the when they come out with all the people that got these scholarships. You know, we don't know how many people got them that they've hidden the name from us, or the trust did. I think we already know Mr. Ben Bowden, I think, was that circuit court or district judge? He has received $45,000, but we don't know a lot of the other characters that receive money. And I bet it is going to be very embarrassing to quite a few. All of them will have to give the money back.
So here you see the lanyard. This is live right now. March 1st. It's one of their headlines here. And I just want to demonstrate that this is not something that has been on the front page. Would you agree, Mr. Ripp?
No, nothing. We beg for people to, in fact, I'm going to find it very, very interesting in the next few days how many different sources of media chime in on this and how they write about it.
Well, this is Mike Kaysen. You know him?
Yeah.
Over there at AL.com?
I've heard of it, Mike, yeah.
Well, he's the lead political reporter for, the Alabama Today networks. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Albritton declined to comment today when he was called about this. Other than two board members, Marshall names in his motion were Rick Clifton and John Bell. Clifton is the president of the Covington County Economic Development Commission. Bell was the board member who represented Regions Bank, which is the trustee of the Mabel Amos Trust funds.
I'll bet they didn't mention you and I and all our efforts to get this out in the open, did they, Harry?
No, sir. They,
I'll be damned. I wonder how that was omitted.
I don't know. It's one of those.
I mean, the Associated Press did the Mabel Amos case. We had it, we picked it up from the AP story back in July. So all this has been out there, and, the Attorney General decided, that, he kept, to go ahead and file his own lawsuit, for fear that, these things could be settled, in little back room, before it gets to a judge, no day in court. So Steve Marshall, he started his own suit. But
and I got to say that's it also may turn out to be a very good chess move on his part, since he's considering running for governor.
So and he has been feuding with the Ethics Commission and Tom Albritton for a while.
That's correct. That is correct.
There's some sort of issue there.
As well as Cynthia Ralston. She's very, very much involved with that same controversy between the AG and ethics.
So Marshall removed her position as a deputy Alabama attorney general, which is a normal role for the lead counsel for the Alabama Ethics Commission.
You guys ever, I prefer the Southern vernacular, but there is, I'm sure, Paul, you got lots of Yankee friends, but Brandon, you know any Yankees? You got any friends from Chicago or anywhere like that, Boston? Because they have
I don't get out of the Southeast too much.
So they have a term of art, and it's kind of the wink and the nod kind of thing all rolled into one. And when it's kind of like the deal at the airport or the deal with NBU and these bungalows. If I had a Yankee friend, he'd look at me and wink and smile and say, "It's a beautiful thing." Don't you agree? I mean, how in the hell can these people keep getting away with this stuff? And they're still in office.
I tell you the thing that really gets me the most. There's no shame. I mean, you have to think, how were these people brought up? What in the hell made them go so sideways that they have no shame about some of the things that they do until it gets to this point? I mean, look what everybody's had to do to finally get this out in the open. This should have been out in the open. This should have been on fire the first day it happened. The first day Rob wrote that article, he should have been damn well dismissed, in my opinion.
So why wasn't he? Because of generational privilege. That's exactly right. So do you agree with my summation that Mr. Albritton should resign? So say we all, except for Brandon, who must maintain journalistic integrity.
Well, I mean, it comes down to the ethics commissioners themselves. When this was first brought up, and, the first lawsuit was filed, they didn't do anything. When the second lawsuit was filed, they didn't do anything. Now the Attorney General has filed a lawsuit, and to this point, they still haven't done anything. They could meet and ask him to resign in a formal hearing. That they could, at their discretion, suspend him pending, final resolution of these lawsuits.
So could the state bar, brother.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of people who could step in. The governor could remove him. The Senate could impeach him. The House could impeach him. The Senate could remove him.
I'm not hearing any rumors that anybody is publicly, we have 140 members of the legislature. None of them have publicly, to my knowledge, called for an investigation of Tom Albritton, and Regions Bank and the handling of the Mabel Amos Trust deal. We're about to do
they're in a tight.
Yeah. So back to all these people with their, ironclad credentials on the Ethics Commission. They went from having the high ground to being on the low ground, wouldn't you say? I mean, there's no cover if we're going to continue the military vernacular. How do they have any cover on this? How can they defend it? The Attorney General's claiming in the civil lawsuit he committed fraud, self-dealing.
The card that Albritton has, that I hope he would not play, is how many complaints has he seen in his position as executive director of the Ethics Commission? How many complaints has he seen against the governor, against the legislators, public officials, elected or appointed all the time, and that he did not see the light of day for one reason or another. I mean, I would hate to think of them not acting for fear of their own potential conflicts being exposed, but you've got to think of that before you do something like say, hey, an ethic, we have a ethical dilemma here.
Well, I told Paul my first ethics complaint I filed in 1998, and there's a file cabinet full of paper that I've sent up to the Ethics Commission since then. I mean, that's a long time. And I finally came to the conclusion that the people there just weren't interested in looking into anything.
No, I think I filed 9 or 10, I believe, total. 9, 10, maybe 11 complaints through the last 12 years, 15 years.
I filed 25, I believe.
And I know several people just like you that have said they were in positions like you were with municipalities who said that they filed multiple too, and nothing ever went anywhere.
So I got to tell you, there was one person in the state government. Her name was Carol Jean Smith. And if you needed an attorney general's opinion, she was the gatekeeper. She wrote them all, right? You asked her a question and she'd give you an answer. You cannot imagine how much corruption was averted by just getting her on speakerphone with a couple county commissioners in the room and her saying, if you some bitches like eating peanut butter sandwiches for the next 10 years, y'all go right ahead. I mean, that was her style, right?
Yeah.
She was the most effective person in state government, and she retired 12 years ago. She was the little boy with his finger in the dike. It's unbelievable what goes on in the state, y'all. And I think it's time for him to go. I can't imagine the Ethics Commission hanging on by their fingernails saying, oh, no, Tom's the best person we ever had in this job.
I'm going to say within the 30 days. I'm going to say within the next 30 days. Wouldn't surprise me if it was within a week, because they're standing there bleeding in front of the whole state. Somebody's got to do something. I just can't see it going. And Marshall knew that when he pulled the trigger on this too.
So Brandon, you the insider, you're up there all the time. Anybody talking about this at the legislature? You need not quote anyone, but
I haven't had anybody speak on this on the record where they want to be quoted.
But that wasn't my question. Is anybody talking
about
it?
There are casual conversations being held as to what's going on, and where are the ethics commissioners? But nobody has taken a public position yet on this. But again, when the session kicks off Tuesday, and all of a sudden there's cameras in front of everybody, I think this question is going to get asked by a reporter or two.
Oh, goody.
Well, Mr. Ripp, this is my life's work, and you paid the freight on the Writ of Mandamus, and I also want to point out to people that you and I traveled to the Attorney General's office on 2 different occasions, and I'll have to admit that complaint you put together on Mr. Albritton was relatively exhaustive. 100 and some odd pages.
130 pages. And I want the listeners to know that a lot of the work that you did and you do on some of these consumer cases is pro bono. And I don't have any other attorneys volunteering to do any consumer pro bono work.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, really.
It's really helped out my reputation in the legal community. I tell you, especially when they're, everybody says, "Hey, that's the guy that's talking about Judge Albritton's kid." Can you believe that? Can you believe that he's accusing the sheriff's department of lying to the public?
Well, Brandon, I think you're right. I think it's like a smoldering volcano, and maybe Tuesday it may blow next week. So I would imagine you're going to have a very interesting week next week.
Yeah, I mean, the Associated Press did their second story on it yesterday, with the AG's, suit. And so that showed up in every newsroom in America that subscribes to the Associated Press. USA Today has picked it up. AL.com, the local deals, WBRC6, and, various, outlets in Alabama have covered it. So, if they have formal, this case actually appears in an open courtroom, at this point, I kind of think the press will actually cover this case. I don't see how Regions Bank and Mr. Albritton really want this discussed in an open courtroom.
No.
I mean, I would be avoiding depositions if I could. There's no telling what the AG can find out, in formal depositions.
Mr. Albritton and them are going to move, and Regions Bank are going to move to settle this now any way they can. Of course, that's not going to get them out of the loop with the AG, but it will get them out of the, out from the other two cases, which are right on top of them.
Yeah, because the other two cases, any facts that are discovered there, is available for the AG's case.
Correct.
So
Correct.
So the Alabama Rules of Civil Procedure, just doing the math in my mind, they would be in the discovery phase in a civil lawsuit right now. They would be in the deposition phase and sending, asking for records and everything. And so what I'm banking on, brother, is that there are other people, the who's who, the Spades, the Jasons, the Underground, the whatever you want to call it, the silk stocking Montgomery crowd, who got this money, and the guidance counselor at Evergreen High School in Conecuh County wasn't even aware that these scholarships were available for children in that county.
And that should have been the primary county that these scholarships were awarded to.
You have to believe that someone at the Attorney General's office is aware of something that's come up in discovery in one or both of these other two cases. And that's what motivated, Steve Marshall to say, hey, I need to do my own case here.
And in a hilarious turn of events, guess who is in the Consumer Affairs Division at the Attorney General's office?
His brother.
Tom's brother. Yeah. So I'll assure you somebody in Consumer Affairs knows all about this because it's his brother. Like I said, man.
There's a lot of Albrittons, and they're not all responsible for what Tom may or may not have done.
Absolutely.
No, but they're aware of it because it's his brother.
Right. Right.
It'd be real hard to say I was unaware of what was going on with my brother.
I've seen Twitter. Some things that a family family member or two of mine have gotten into over the years that, I may be aware of it, but I'm not involved in it in any way.
So look, Brandon, if your life was a cartoon and you ran off the end of a cliff, you would fall. And for some reason, we're sitting here watching Tom Albritton hang in midair like Wile E. Coyote. And the only thing that could be keeping him up there is the influence that his family has. I can't imagine anything else.
That's going to be tested.
Or Brandon's theory that nobody wants anybody to look at all these things that Tom Albritton buried since 2015.
Yep.
That could be absolutely true also. But either way, he needs to resign.
It would be easier for everyone if he did go ahead and resign at this point. The commission, then, their hands would be clean. They wouldn't have to ask him to resign. There would have to be some sort of disputed firing or anything like that. And that would allow him to focus on his own civil litigations, that are taking away attention from the actual business of the Alabama Ethics Commission.
Right. Right.
Well, Mr. Ripp, it was your dime. I'm going to give you the last word.
My last word is bye-bye, Tom.
So say we all. So say we all.
Say we all.
So say we all. So say we all.
So say we all.